The metallic blue Honda parked behind my son-in-law's back gate made my heart skip a beat. That was my wife's car, my wife who died months ago. The car we had supposedly sold. Why was it here? Have you ever discovered something horrifying about your closest family members? Please leave a comment and share your feelings below. I crept closer, and through the cracked window, I heard a familiar voice discussing mental incompetency papers and dividing the old man's assets. My blood ran cold as I realized the terrifying conspiracy unfolding. What I overheard next would shatter everything I thought I knew about the people I trusted most. When you've lived 6 decades, you know when something feels wrong in your own home. Tell me where you're watching from, because I guarantee you've seen these warning signs too. My own oak chair kept disappearing whenever guests came over, and I sat on a flimsy folding chair like a guest in my house. Sarah would apologize, claiming she forgot to set it out. Tom would shrug and offer me some garage furniture. I'd sit there wondering when I became someone worth hiding from view. For 30 years, that chair represented my place at the head of our family table, but now it vanished like my authority in this house. The second red flag hit me when I tried accessing my bank account online. Authorized representative changes, the screen read. Changes I never approved. When I asked Sarah about it, she got that nervous laugh, the same one she had as a kid when she broke something valuable. Oh, Dad, Tom just added his name to help with your bills. You know how technology confuses you sometimes. I built homes with a slide rule. Confused? Not a chance. But I kept quiet, swallowing my pride like bitter medicine. Maybe grief made me paranoid, or maybe they counted on that. Turns out I wasn't paranoid enough about what was happening under my own roof. Her recliner, our evening ritual, was now buried in cobwebs in the basement. I ran my hand over the cracked leather and felt like they'd buried her memory alive. That burgundy chair where Margaret would sit every evening, reading her mystery novels and sipping chamomile tea with honey. When I asked why they moved it, Tom said the living room needed better flow for entertaining. Like Margaret's presence was blocking traffic at their dinner parties. The casual dismissal of 30 years of shared evenings cut deeper than any direct insult they could have thrown at my face. That Tuesday morning in March, I decided enough was enough. I needed to have a real conversation with Tom, man to man, without Sarah playing referee or making excuses for his increasingly strange behavior. I drove to their house, the house I built with my own hands, every nail and board chosen with deliberate care. But as I pulled into their driveway, my heart stopped cold. There, hidden behind the back gate like some guilty secret, was Margaret's old Honda Civic. The dent on the bumper from chemo days hit harder than any punch, bringing back Sunday drives and her final hospital visits in one devastating wave of memory. The same car we'd supposedly sold to a nice young couple from Richmond, according to Sarah's tearful explanation. I walked closer, my legs feeling unsteady, touching that familiar battle scar from when Margaret backed into our mailbox during her first chemotherapy session. My chest tightened with confusion and growing dread. Margaret, why is your car here? What aren't they telling me about this whole situation that's making my skin crawl with suspicion? Through the slightly cracked passenger window, I could hear Tom's voice, muffled but clear enough to make my blood run cold through my veins. The conversation that followed changed everything I thought I knew about my family and the people I'd trusted with my life. Tom was pacing nervously near the car's trunk like a caged animal, speaking into his phone with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. The doctor signs the incompetency papers next week. Assets move to Sarah, and we split everything, he said, without any emotion in his voice. Jane's tinny voice crackled through the phone speaker. What if Sarah hesitates when the time comes? Tom chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl like insects walking across my spine. She already signed the power of attorney documents last month. Told her they were protective measures for her dad's well-being. My throat locked. My own son-in-law was planning my erasure like a line item on a business spreadsheet. This man I'd welcomed into my family like my own son, taught to use my tools, shared countless beers with during Sunday football games, was talking about me like I was livestock being sold at auction. I pressed myself against the garage wall, hoping Tom wouldn't spot me lurking there in the shadows. The world tilted sideways, and I had to grip the garage wall to keep from falling over completely. Tom opened the car trunk and pulled out a cardboard box filled with official papers. Even from 20 feet away, I recognized my personal documents, items that had mysteriously disappeared from my bedroom desk over recent weeks. The methodical nature of his theft was more terrifying than any crime of passion. Tom lifted a manila envelope marked in Margaret's handwriting. For Richard's eyes only. My dead wife was trying to warn me, but was I already too late? What had my dying wife discovered about this man we'd trusted with our only daughter's future? Tom suddenly glanced around suspiciously, like he sensed someone watching his every criminal move. I ducked behind the garden shed, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it echoing across the driveway like thunder during a summer storm. Through the car's open window, Jane's voice crackled with cold malice. Make sure you burn every single old document, especially anything that woman left behind. As Tom walked toward the house, clutching that precious envelope from Margaret like stolen treasure, the full scope of their conspiracy became crystal clear. They weren't just planning to steal my money or property. They were planning to erase my entire existence, my dignity, my right to live independently during my golden years. The envelope disappeared through their front door, and with it, possibly my only hope of understanding what Margaret had tried to warn me about before cancer stole her voice forever and left me alone and vulnerable to wolves I'd invited into my own home. Every landmark looked staged, like the world knew a secret I didn't. The old Methodist church where we were married seemed to mock my ignorance of what was happening in my own family. Had I been living blind this whole time? Inside my house, excuse me, their house. The grandfather clock's ticking sounded deafeningly loud in the oppressive silence. I noticed they'd moved our wedding photograph from its place of honor on the mantel to a less prominent spot on the bookshelf, tucked between Tom's banking magazines like an afterthought. The house felt different now, colder, more suspicious, as if Margaret's spirit was desperately trying to break through some invisible barrier to warn me of approaching danger. That evening, after Tom and Sarah went to bed, I found myself standing in Margaret's walk-in closet. Her lavender scent clung to the silence like a last breath, and I wasn't searching for secrets, but my hands found one anyway. Behind her winter coats, pushed far back against the wall where casual observers wouldn't notice, my fingers discovered something that would change everything. A leather-bound journal I'd never seen before in our decades of marriage. Margaret was always writing, but this was different. The leather was soft and worn, like she'd handled it frequently during her final months, when I thought she was just resting and recovering from treatments. My hands trembled as I opened to the first page and saw her careful penmanship, still elegant despite the tremor that chemotherapy had given her. Her first line burned. "If you're reading this, Richard, the wolves are already inside the gate." Each page wasn't just ink. It was ammunition Margaret left behind for a war I didn't even know was being fought. Tom owes over $200,000 to illegal gambling operations, debt he accumulated before he even married Sarah, she'd written in blue ink. He came to me 6 months ago, begging for money, claiming men with guns had threatened him. I gripped the counter until my knuckles went white. My son-in-law wasn't desperate. He was dangerous. Tom? Gambling? The same Tom who lectured Sarah about budgets and complained about $15 takeout orders? I flipped through more pages, each entry more disturbing than the last. And Jane? She forged my father's will 20 years ago. Margaret stopped her then, but some snakes never stop circling, waiting for their chance to strike when you're most vulnerable. My sister-in-law had tried to rob us blind 2 decades ago, and my wife had protected me without ever saying a word about the danger lurking in our own family. Margaret had known everything, suspected everyone, documented every threat like she was building a legal case from her deathbed with prosecutorial precision. If anything happens to me, another entry read in increasingly shaky handwriting, Richard must not trust anyone, not even blood relatives who smile to his face while sharpening knives behind their backs. Peterson has everything he needs to protect Richard from these vultures. Call him immediately. 555, help, now. I stared at that phone number until it blurred through my tears of grief and rage mixed together. My wife, dying of cancer and fighting unbearable pain, had spent her final months protecting me from predators I couldn't even see circling overhead, waiting for her to die so they could feast on what we'd built together. Peterson answered on the second ring. "Richard, I was waiting for this call." His familiar voice brought instant relief, like hearing from a lifeline thrown into stormy waters. Margaret visited me 3 months before she passed, and she was terrified about Tom's behavior patterns. She made me promise to protect you if anything suspicious happened after her death. She gave me a backup of everything, documents, recordings, proof that would bury them, Peterson said quietly, his lawyer's voice steady and reassuring. She secretly provided me with copies of every important document, but Richard, she also gave me something else that will shock you, a digital recording of Tom confessing his gambling debts to her. The room spun around me like I was caught in a tornado of betrayal and deception. Margaret, dying and in constant pain, had been conducting her own investigation, wearing recording devices, building a legal case, protecting me even when I thought she was just sleeping more and withdrawing from life naturally. "She recorded him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper of disbelief. "Multiple conversations," Peterson confirmed with satisfaction. "Tom confessing to forging your signatures, discussing plans to have you declared incompetent, even talking about which nursing homes would be cheapest. Margaret was building an ironclad case against him, Richard. She knew she was dying, but she wasn't going to let you die with her financially or otherwise." While Peterson explained Margaret's documentation system in detail, I heard the front door key turning unexpectedly early. Sarah was coming home from her book club meeting, but panic was written in the speed of her footsteps. I quickly hid in the walk-in closet, pressing my ear to the door as my daughter's panicked voice filled the hallway like a siren announcing disaster. Through the closet door, I heard my daughter's voice tremble. "Tom, Dad's acting strange. What if he knows?" My blood froze mid-breath as Sarah continued her fearful phone conversation. "The way he looks at me sometimes, it's like he can see right through my lies. What if he's figured out what we've been doing behind his back?" As I crouched in that dark closet, surrounded by Margaret's dresses and the lingering scent of her perfume, one terrifying question consumed my mind like acid eating through steel. How deep does this family betrayal actually go? And how many people I love want me destroyed? Sarah's voice carried genuine fear as she whispered into the phone about documents she'd signed and things Tom had told her were protective measures. Was my own daughter actively plotting against me? Or was she just another victim of Tom's psychological manipulation? The answer to that question would determine whether I had any family left worth saving, or if I was truly alone in this fight for my life and dignity. Peterson arrived at my house before dawn, carrying a professional-looking briefcase that belonged in courtrooms rather than suburban living rooms. Peterson slid a recorder behind the bookshelf, like he'd done this 100 times in court cases, his movements precise and practiced. This device will capture every word they say when they think you're not listening. The sound quality is courtroom ready, Richard. This wasn't just surveillance, it was survival. And the irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to spy on my own family in the house I built with decades of sweat and love. But after everything I'd learned about their betrayal, I felt no guilt, only cold determination burning in my chest like a forge heating metal for the hammer. The performance began at breakfast, and I channeled every ounce of acting ability I possessed from my younger days. I let my hand tremble on purpose, whispering, "Maybe it's time I put my affairs in order." Her coffee cup rattled like a guilty conscience as Sarah set it down with trembling hands. I clutched my chest dramatically, complaining about heart palpitations and dizziness that felt disturbingly real under the circumstances. The panic in her voice when she called Tom almost made me feel guilty about my deception. But then I remembered his cold laughter, and my resolve hardened like concrete setting in winter. If they wanted to play games with my life and Margaret's memory, I'd show them what a real strategist could accomplish. That evening, the players assembled in my living room for what they believed was a private family meeting to discuss my declining health and future care options. Jane arrived first, looking around the house with calculating eyes, probably mentally cataloging assets and estimating values like she was planning an estate sale. Tom came straight from work, still wearing his pressed banker's tie and that fake, concerned expression he'd perfected over months of systematic manipulation. Sarah sat between them on the couch, genuinely worried about her father's health, completely unaware she was sitting in the middle of a conspiracy that would destroy her marriage. They had no idea they were being recorded, no clue that every word would soon be used as evidence against them. I excused myself to rest in my bedroom, but actually pressed my ear to the heating vent that carried sound perfectly from the living room below. The conversation that filtered up through the metal ductwork was more damning than anything I could have imagined in my worst nightmares. "The old man is definitely getting suspicious about our arrangements." Tom's voice carried clearly through the ventilation system like poison gas seeping through the house. "We need to accelerate our timeline significantly before he figures out what we're really planning to do with his assets." Jane's response was immediate and heartless. "I'll pressure Sarah into signing the house sale documents tomorrow morning. We'll tell her it's to pay for Richard's medical treatments." Sarah's voice trembled with uncertainty. "But Dad actually seems pretty healthy most of the time. Maybe we should wait, get a second medical opinion before we do anything permanent." Tom's frustrated response revealed his true nature. "Sign the papers or your father ends up in a state ward. Your choice, Sarah." Jane leaned in, voice like acid eating through metal. "He's lived his life. Don't let his paranoia wreck yours, Sarah." Every word was gasoline on a fire I couldn't let burn yet, but the flames were building inside me with dangerous intensity. I gripped Margaret's photograph, drawing strength from her determined smile and the memory of her courage during those final months when she was secretly protecting me from dangers I couldn't see. Sarah's voice broke with genuine anguish. "I just want to take care of Dad properly and make sure he's safe and comfortable. But you're really scaring me with this talk about dangerous people and violence, Tom." Tom's manipulation reached new levels of psychological abuse. "If you don't sign those papers voluntarily, I'll be forced to have your father," declared, mentally unstable and incompetent. Do you really want him warehoused in some state nursing home facility where nobody cares if he lives or dies? The threat hung in the air like poison gas, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming at them through the heating vent. Just as the tension reached its peak, I spotted a shadow moving outside the living room window with deliberate stealth. Peterson stood in the darkness, making subtle hand signals for me to remain quiet and stay hidden upstairs where I couldn't be seen. He'd been monitoring the situation from outside, probably recording additional evidence through the windows with professional-grade equipment that would stand up in court. As I watched my old friend approach the front door, briefcase in hand, and wearing the expression of a prosecutor about to destroy his opponents, a chilling realization struck me like lightning. This was the moment of truth we'd been building toward all evening like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. Peterson had everything he needed to destroy Tom and Jane legally, but first, they needed to incriminate themselves completely and beyond any reasonable doubt. As Peterson's silhouette crossed the porch, Tom muttered words that made my gut twist. "Tomorrow, it's done, one way or another." The finality in his voice sent ice through my veins because I realized they weren't just planning to steal my money or property. They were planning something far more permanent and destructive, something that would erase me completely from the world I'd built with my own hands. What if Margaret's ghost was finally getting her well-deserved revenge from beyond the grave, using Peterson and me as instruments of justice against people who had betrayed everything decent in human relationships? The front door was about to open, and with it, the floodgates of truth that would wash away every lie they'd built their conspiracy upon like a tsunami of accountability. Peterson stepped in without knocking. The briefcase hit the table with a dull thud that silenced the room. Tom froze mid-breath, Jane blinked hard, and Sarah's face drained of color completely. They knew something irreversible had just walked through that door, something that would change everything they thought they controlled. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly, and I could feel the shift from casual conversation to courtroom tension crackling in the air between us. Peterson's presence changed everything, transforming this family gathering into something far more serious and dangerous than any of them had anticipated. I've shared similar family betrayal stories before, but this particular case changed how I view loyalty forever. Tom started to stand, probably planning some excuse or escape route, but Peterson's steady gaze made him sink back into his chair like a deflated balloon, losing all its air at once. From the top of the stairs, I watched every flicker of panic cross their faces. Peterson laid out papers one by one, each one a nail in their plans. There was no exit, no excuse that could save them now from the mountain of evidence stacked against them like bricks in a wall. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived after months of lies and systematic manipulation. Authentic will, notarized, bank records with forged signatures, and recordings, enough to bury you twice. Peterson's voice remained steady and professional, while delivering devastating blows that would destroy lives and families forever. Each revelation landed like a physical punch, and I watched their expressions cycle through shock, fear, and desperate calculation as they realized the magnitude of evidence stacked against them. Jane shifted uncomfortably in her chair, probably calculating escape routes and damage control strategies, while Tom's face went white as fresh paint. The paper trail was undeniable, documented proof of systematic fraud and elder abuse that would hold up in any courtroom in America. But the final blow was yet to come, and Peterson saved the best evidence for last like a master prosecutor building toward his closing argument. He pulled out a small digital recorder, the twin to the one hidden in my bookshelf, and placed it on the coffee table like a hand grenade with the pin pulled out. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway and the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath as she realized the magnitude of what they'd been caught doing. Tom's face cycled through emotions like a broken television switching channels. Shock, fear, anger, and finally, desperate calculation as he searched for some angle that might save him. Can you actually believe that blood relatives would betray someone this systematically? I stepped out of the shadows and said, calm and cold, "You plotted my life like a business deal. Under my roof." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, and Tom scrambled desperately, his voice cracking under the pressure of being caught red-handed. "Richard, the system was going to take your money anyway. I just got ahead of it," he said with chilling self-interest that revealed his true nature underneath the respectable facade. The pathetic justification sounded hollow even to his own ears, a desperate attempt to rationalize the unforgivable betrayal of family trust and love. Sarah dropped to her knees on the floor I'd sanded with my own hands. "Dad, I thought I was protecting you," she sobbed. Her tears were raw. It wasn't an act. For the first time, I saw my daughter torn apart by the weight of her choices. When Peterson mentioned her name appearing on the forged documents, she jerked her hand back as if the papers were on fire, burning her fingers with their legal implications. She collapsed completely, understanding finally what she'd been manipulated into doing against her own father. Her voice cracked with authentic remorse that cut through my anger like a knife. And despite everything, my heart ached watching my daughter's world crumble in real time. In that moment, I realized Sarah had been as much a victim as I had been, manipulated by the man she loved and trusted above all others in this world. Her tears were genuine and devastating to witness, as a father who'd spent 32 years protecting her from harm. Tom's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the desperate monster underneath his respectable banker exterior that had fooled us all for years. His face flushed crimson with rage and desperation as he realized his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling beyond any hope of repair or damage control. The man I'd once trusted completely was showing his true colors at last, and they were uglier than I'd ever imagined. Peterson slid another manila envelope toward Tom with deliberate ceremony, each movement calculated for maximum psychological impact. "This contains documented proof of your systematic plan to have Richard declared mentally incompetent through bribery and fraud. You contacted multiple doctors, offering substantial cash payments for falsified medical assessments that would destroy an innocent man's life. Several ethical physicians had recorded those conversations and turned them over to authorities, creating an ironclad case against Tom's criminal conspiracy." As I stared at this man I'd once welcomed at my dinner table for 5 years, taught to use my power tools, shared holiday meals and family celebrations with, the full scope of his evil became crystal clear. "You plotted my erasure in the house I built, while looking me in the eye at dinner." This wasn't just about stealing money or property from a grieving widower. This was about systematically destroying my entire existence, erasing my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live independently in my golden years like a free American citizen. Margaret had seen it coming with dying eyes, prepared for it with her final breaths, and now her plan was working perfectly from beyond the grave, like a guardian angel protecting me from wolves in sheep's clothing. The hunter had become the hunted, and justice was about to be served cold on a silver platter. Peterson slid a final envelope across the table. "You think this is bad? Wait until you hear what's on this tape." Peterson's hand hovered over the recorder. My pulse hammered. If the papers were a hammer, what came next would be a wrecking ball that would destroy everything they thought they knew about consequences and accountability for their crimes against family. Peterson opened his laptop. One click, and Tom's voice spilled out, clear as glass. 50 grand if you sign him incompetent. No one will question a doctor. My stomach dropped. He wasn't hesitating. He was negotiating my erasure like a contractor quoting a job. The words hung in the air with crystal clarity, Tom's voice unmistakably identifying himself before launching into his criminal proposition with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. The air thickened, my pulse slamming like a hammer against steel, as I listened to my own son-in-law casually discuss destroying my life for money. Even Jane, who'd been Tom's willing co-conspirator in this elaborate scheme, looked shocked at the brazen criminality of bribing a medical professional to falsify official documents. The doctor's uncertain voice responded through the laptop speakers with obvious reluctance and professional concern. But from my observations during his routine checkups, he appears completely mentally sound and capable of independent decision-making. Tom's persuasive tone was chilling in its casual evil, like he was discussing the weather or ordering lunch from his favorite restaurant. "Who's really going to investigate thoroughly, Doctor? Just sign the paperwork, and we both benefit significantly from this arrangement. Richard will get the care he needs, and you'll get compensation for your time and expertise." Listening to him bargain in that calm tone told me everything. This wasn't panic. It was architecture, every lie, every forged paper, laid out like blueprints for my destruction. Her eyes widened, shattering like glass under pressure as Sarah finally understood the depth of her husband's calculated evil and systematic betrayal of everything decent in human relationships. The recording continued with more incriminating details, each word another nail in Tom's legal coffin that would ensure he faced serious consequences for his systematic elder abuse. This wasn't desperation or poor judgment under pressure from financial difficulties. This was methodical, premeditated elder abuse planned over months, maybe years, with the patience of a predator stalking prey until the perfect moment to strike, when I was most vulnerable. Tom had been planning this elaborate scheme while sitting at my dinner table, pretending to care about my well-being after Margaret's death. Peterson continued his devastating presentation with prosecutorial precision that would have made any courtroom proud of his thorough preparation and attention to detail. More recordings, more documentation, a paper trail stretching back 2 years showing Tom's gambling losses, his mounting desperation, his increasingly aggressive attempts to access family assets through manipulation and fraud. Tom contacted 6 different doctors before finding one willing to consider falsifying medical records for monetary compensation, Peterson explained methodically, his voice never wavering from professional calm. He researched elder abuse laws, studied mental competency procedures, even consulted with nursing home administrators about the cheapest placement options for long-term care. The premeditation is staggering, Richard. Now came Sarah's impossible choice, and I watched my daughter face the most difficult decision of her life with trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks. Peterson placed an official witness statement in front of her, requiring her testimony against her own husband, the father of her child, the man she'd planned to grow old with before discovering his true nature. She gripped the pen like it weighed 100 pounds. When the ink touched paper, her sob cut through the silence. In that shaky line, my daughter severed the last tie to the man she thought she loved. The courage it took for her to sign that document, to testify against the father of her child, to admit her own complicity in crimes against her family, was remarkable and heartbreaking to witness. In that moment, I saw glimpses of the strong woman Margaret and I had raised, the daughter who could choose right over easy when push came to shove, and moral courage was required. Tom crumbled to his knees on the floor, desperately begging for forgiveness and mercy, but his performance rang hollow after everything we'd heard from his own mouth. Tom crawled forward, voice cracking. "Think about Sarah. About your grandson. You send me away, you break them too." His words scraped like rusted metal, but they didn't cut anymore. I looked straight through him with cold finality that came from decades of life experience. You had every possible opportunity to choose the right path from the very beginning, Tom. Jane attempted one last character assassination, claiming I'd always been manipulative and controlling, trying to paint herself as a victim of my supposed tyranny and unreasonable demands. You've played victim so long, Jane. You forgot predators leave tracks, and I've got every one of yours. Peterson produced 20-year-old court records documenting her previous attempt to steal family property through forged documents, proving this was a pattern of criminal behavior spanning decades. Jane Mitchell, you're now facing serious criminal charges for conspiracy to commit elder fraud and attempted theft of assets exceeding $500,000, Peterson announced with satisfaction that came from years of fighting for justice. Blue and red lights spilled through the curtains, washing the room in judgment as police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second like the sound of approaching justice that couldn't be stopped or negotiated away. Peterson had contacted law enforcement before entering the house, timing their arrival perfectly for maximum psychological impact and legal effectiveness that would ensure proper consequences for their crimes against me and my family. The officers prepared to arrest Tom and Jane for their conspiracy to commit elder fraud and destroy my life. But something inside me shifted like tectonic plates, rearranging the landscape of my heart and mind. I raised my hand as the cuffs hovered. Not yet. Every head jerked toward me. They thought I was sparing him. They had no idea what I was about to demand. Tom's face flickered with pathetic hope, like a drowning man seeing what he thinks is a life preserver floating toward him in dark water. Sarah looked terrified that I might show mercy that would somehow backfire and make everything worse than it already was. Peterson raised an eyebrow, trusting my judgment, but curious about my strategy and what conditions I might impose. As red and blue lights flashed through the living room windows, casting everything in surreal colors like a nightmare made real, I wondered if I was about to make the right choice or create a bigger problem for everyone involved in this mess. Outside, life moved like nothing had changed, while inside, justice waited in the dark. I studied Sarah's tear-streaked face for a long moment, seeing Margaret's delicate features reflected there, recognizing her genuine remorse and horror at discovering her husband's true nature underneath his charming exterior. The familiar sounds of suburban evening continued around us, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding inside this house, where trust had been murdered and buried in shallow graves of deception. When the moment felt right, when the weight of everything settled into my bones like concrete, I knew what had to be done to restore some semblance of justice and balance. I stepped back in with a voice that carried steel. He doesn't walk free, he walks on my terms. The relief that flooded Tom's face was premature and pathetic, like a condemned man who thought he'd been pardoned when the execution was merely postponed. I wasn't just punishing him. I was testing Sarah, too, to see if she had the moral backbone to support real consequences for her husband's crimes against her own father. Relief flickered in his eyes. He still didn't get it. This wasn't mercy flowing from a grandfather's soft heart. This was controlled demolition of a man who'd tried to destroy me systematically, and I was going to watch every piece of his false life crumble under the weight of his own choices. My conditions were swift and decisive, delivered with the authority of a man who'd built his own house and wouldn't be pushed around in it by anyone. 6 months to repay every cent, 500 hours of shelter work, a public apology in print with your face front and center. Tom must repay every stolen dollar within exactly 6 months, with documented proof of each payment and its legitimate source. 500 hours of community service performed at local homeless shelters, where he'd learn what real hardship looked like, what it meant to lose everything through circumstances beyond your control, rather than through criminal choices made in comfortable suburban offices. A permanent legal prohibition from accessing my financial accounts or property, enforced through restraining orders and court oversight that would follow him for the rest of his miserable life. But the condition that made him flinch visibly was the public written apology, to be published in our local newspaper with his full name and photograph, acknowledging his crimes against his own family in excruciating detail. His banker's reputation, his professional image, his standing in the community where he'd built his career on trust and respectability, all of it would be destroyed by his own words. You wanted power? Let's see you live stripped bare in the community you tried to fool with your respectable facade and charitable donations. You'll also undergo mandatory counseling for gambling addiction and attend weekly meetings for 1 full year, I added, watching his face crumble further under the weight of real consequences. This is about a sickness that made you capable of betraying people who loved you unconditionally and welcomed you into their family with open hearts. Margaret's sister Jane received no such mercy or consideration from me whatsoever. This represented her second documented attempt at family betrayal spanning 2 decades, and I'd learned through bitter experience that some people never change, never learn, never develop consciences or moral boundaries. Jane, you don't get conditions. You get cuffs, I said with cold finality as the police officers escorted her away. As the squad car pulled away with its flashing lights disappearing into the darkness, I felt no satisfaction, just cold relief that this particular threat was permanently neutralized and couldn't hurt anyone else I cared about in the future. Some battles you win through forgiveness and rehabilitation when people show genuine remorse. Others you win through decisive action and permanent consequences that protect future victims from predators who see kindness as weakness to be exploited. Sarah desperately begged to come with me wherever I was planning to go, to start over together, to prove her loyalty and love through actions rather than empty words that had lost their meaning. She begged to come with me. I shook my head. You don't heal trust by running from rubble. You rebuild it where it fell. Looking at my daughter, I saw both Margaret's essential goodness and the weakness that had made her vulnerable to manipulation by someone she trusted completely. Prove to me through your actions that you're fundamentally different from him, Sarah. I'll be watching from a distance, hoping for your redemption and growth. But you need to find your own moral compass first before we can move forward as father and daughter. Before walking toward my car, I turned back with paternal love, mixed with necessary firmness. When you're ready, when you've proven to yourself that you can stand on your own principles without being swayed by manipulation or false promises, call me. But not before then, Sarah. I love you, but I won't be anyone's victim again, not even yours, through good intentions and weak character. Tom sat completely broken in his chair, watching me leave with quiet dignity intact. Probably for the first time since I'd known him experiencing genuine consequences for his actions, rather than getting away with everything through charm and manipulation. I drove away, her sobs chasing me down the street. In my mirror, that house glowed warm, but inside it lay cold ashes of everything we'd been. Sarah ran after my car, crying and calling my name like a child who'd lost her way home and didn't know how to find it again without help. In my rearview mirror, I watched my daughter standing alone in the driveway, finally understanding the devastating consequences of her choices and the long road back to redemption that stretched ahead of her. At the corner, I paused and looked back one final time at the house I'd built with my own hands, now knowing I might never set foot in it again. Was this the last goodbye, or the start of something worth saving? 6 months later, salt wind slapped my face as waves shattered against rock. For the first time in months, my lungs felt full of air that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. I sit peacefully on my ocean-front apartment balcony, watching the endless rhythm of water that has shaped coastlines for millions of years with patient persistence. The apartment is modest, but perfect for my needs. One bedroom with a view that changes throughout the day, from sunrise pastels painting the water in soft colors to sunset gold, reflecting off the waves like liquid metal. I chose this place deliberately, somewhere Margaret and I had never been together, somewhere without ghosts or memories demanding attention, somewhere I could build new experiences without the crushing weight of the past. I traded blueprints for blank pages and started building a life without ghosts. My hands, weathered from decades of construction work, now spend their mornings holding coffee cups and paperback novels instead of hammers and blueprints that once defined my identity and purpose. The morning sun creates dancing reflections on the endless water, and for the first time in nearly a year, I feel genuinely alive and purposeful rather than just surviving day to day like some kind of emotional zombie walking through the motions of living. Every month, his envelope arrives, payments stapled to shelter logs, each hour scrubbing floors, peeling away his arrogance. Tom's monthly restitution payment never arrives late, never falls short, accompanied by brief, formal notes documenting his community service hours and counseling progress with mechanical precision. He successfully completed all 500 required hours at the downtown homeless shelter, and, according to the coordinator I occasionally speak with, the experience genuinely changed his perspective on privilege and responsibility in ways that years of comfortable suburban living never could. The public humiliation initially crushed his arrogance and false pride, but gradually taught him authentic humility and empathy for people who'd lost everything. He now works an honest construction job, ironic considering he once looked down on manual labor as beneath his educational level and social status. His newspaper apology was thorough, specific, and according to local friends, completely destroyed his social standing, but somehow freed him to become a more honest person. Sometimes losing everything you thought mattered is the only way to discover what actually matters in life. Her voice sounded different now, steady, with an edge of earned steel. "Dad, we're okay. Michael's okay. And this time, no one decides that for us," Sarah tells me during our Sunday morning conversations that have become the highlight of my week. She calls every Sunday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. Our conversations growing longer and more natural each week as she slowly rebuilds herself from the ground up with determination that reminds me of Margaret's strength. She courageously divorced Tom and relocated to a modest apartment across town with her young son, my grandson, whose name is Michael and who's now 8 years old and learning to ride a bicycle. She learned genuine independence and financial responsibility the hard way, working 2 part-time jobs while studying for her real estate license, proving to herself that she could survive and thrive without depending on manipulation or false promises from unreliable people. When she asked to visit, my chest ached, not from age, but from something I thought I'd buried. Hope. The pride in my voice is genuine and well-deserved when I tell her how impressed I am with her progress and moral growth. Watching her rebuild herself from nothing, refusing Tom's pathetic attempts at reconciliation and manipulation, focusing on her son's future instead of her own comfort. She's becoming the woman Margaret and I always hoped she'd become. Last week, Sarah asked the question I'd been waiting to hear for months. "Dad, could I possibly visit you next month? I really want you to meet your grandson properly, and I want him to know his grandfather." My eyes welled up with unexpected emotion. I would absolutely love that more than anything in this world. We're planning a weekend together. Nothing elaborate or expensive, just beach walks and ice cream and the kind of simple family time that feels precious because it's been earned through struggle and growth rather than taken for granted. I've been preparing the guest room, buying books suitable for an 8-year-old, researching child-friendly restaurants nearby where we can make new memories untainted by the betrayal and pain of the past year. The anticipation feels like Christmas morning, that wonderful mixture of excitement and nervousness. Peterson has evolved into my closest friend and confidant, proving that genuine loyalty and moral integrity still exist in an increasingly corrupt world where trust is rare and valuable. We meet for lunch twice a week at a small cafe overlooking the harbor, sometimes discussing legal matters, often just sharing stories about our grandchildren and retirement adventures. He never takes credit for orchestrating Margaret's plan or saving me from financial ruin, always emphasizing that she was the true strategist, the one who saw danger coming and prepared defenses with the skill of a general planning for war. Sometimes victory isn't a headline, it's quiet coffee on a balcony, knowing the people who tried to break you now have to live with the truth. You rebuilt, and you didn't break. This evening, I pour 2 steaming cups of tea, placing one beside Margaret's framed photograph on my kitchen table, continuing our old routine in this new place with new hope for the future. "Just like always, my love," I say to her picture, feeling her approval and love surrounding me like a warm embrace. I successfully protected everything we built together. Sarah's coming home next month, truly coming home this time, with respect and maturity earned through her own choices. And I'm living well and purposefully for both of us. I raised my cup to Margaret's photo, the ocean roaring behind me. "We won," I whispered, not with rage, but with a life they'll never touch again. In that perfect moment, watching the golden sunset paint the endless ocean in brilliant colors that Margaret would have loved, I realize I've won something far more valuable than money or property or even justice served cold. I close my eyes and feel complete peace washing over me like the waves below, understanding that sometimes the greatest victory isn't about destroying people who hurt you or seeking elaborate revenge. It's about showing them there's a better way to live with honor and dignity, and then living it yourself every single day until your last breath. Sometimes the people who say they love you are the ones planning your downfall. Trust your instincts, even when grief makes you doubt yourself. If this story hit close to home, a like really helps me keep sharing these tales. Hit that thanks button if you can spare it, no pressure though. Until we meet again, stay sharp out there.